Like, you know those moments in your life where it's just kind of like there's no way I can personally deny God knowing that happened. I came across a TikTok video of this 8-year-old who is biologically a boy, and his mom is sitting there asking him a bunch of questions about why he chose to transition to a girl. The main point of my thesis was to talk about how gender affirming care, which is when you transition basically, is maltreatment.
Maybe the biggest part of my story is just my family.
I moved to Vero Beach for flight school.
Playing football, especially, how we get invited to a lot of parties.
During this time, he's like full weight on this knife trying to plunge it in there.
Like, knowing the Lord brings me so much peace and joy and just confidence.
So I held this dude as he took his last breath, and it triggered this question. It said, what is this life for?
Yo, what's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of Thrive and Dive, thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. The purpose of this show is to help you thrive in your life, and I bring on people that I feel are thriving in their lives so that they can share either their testimony or areas of expertise so that you too can thrive in your life. And I'm joined here today by a powerhouse. I have the Suubi Fluker and Robin Harwick. Suubi, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I did my thesis presentation on Tuesday, so I'm feeling very relaxed as I'm realizing all the stuff I can do and not feel guilty about relaxing because I don't have to do my thesis anymore.
Let's go. We'll give some more context to those of you who are like, what's a thesis? It's something that's super cool, and Suubi just completed it, and it's actually going to be the topic of our discussion. And Robin or Miss Harwick, which do you prefer on this?
You can call me Robin.
Robin. All right, Rob. I know her as Miss Harwick because she was a teacher back when I was a student, and she's currently a teacher to Suubi at Masters Academy, so we just want to make sure we respect the titles here. But Robin, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing well also. Being through with the entire thesis process is a relief, I'm sure, for everyone, including myself.
Let's go. Yes. So for some context, let's just jump into exactly what we mean by this thesis that's been referenced twice. So I'm actually going to have Robin share a little bit about what the thesis thing project is. So for context, Masters Academy is a school here in Vero Beach, Florida. If you're a local, you know this school. Great school, wonderful school. I graduated from it. Suubi's about to graduate from it. And Robin has 2 children that graduated from it. She's been working there for how many years now?
21.
21 years. That's wow. 21 years. That's awesome, man. It passed the double decade mark. So the thesis is something that's not necessarily specific just to Masters Academy. I think other schools do some version of this, but this is something that is very specific to schools in our area. So where we have this final capstone project for the seniors of our school. And Robin, can you just share a little bit about the heartbeat behind why we take our seniors through this rigorous, daunting process? Like, what's the ROI on them doing something like this?
Well, the thesis project is basically a culmination of all of the learning from throughout the students' time at Masters, whether they started when they were in kindergarten or before, or whether they came later on. It is usually, I believe, around 20 pages or so, right, Suubi?
Yeah.
Then with usually an introduction, there's usually an abstract. They definitely have their source page, their sources that they refer to throughout the project. And it's basically like a research paper over a usually controversial topic at the time that they work on throughout their senior year and accomplish by the end of their senior year.
Love it. Very good. So I've had the pleasure of doing one. See, we just finished one, and every senior that's on the traditional route of our school program does it, right? I don't believe the VOTEC does senior thesis.
I think at one point they had a choice, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, 4 of the VOTEC seniors started off doing a thesis, but then I think they backed out because I know 2 of them didn't realize like how heavy.
Yeah, so it's optional. So so for some context here at Masters Academy, we have 2 high school tracks at the school, one a VOTEC track and then one a traditional track. So every traditional student though has to do the thesis. There's no opting out. Yes, awesome. So it's the pinnacle, and I know for me, I enjoyed it because it kind of it is the pinnacle of a long educational experience, but it definitely launched me into the idea of, okay, I need to be able to gather research, gather information from credible sources, and not just say, well, most people struggle with this, or most people, because one of the things we can do that's so destructive is do generalities and not have our actual like receipts, as how the kids call it these days. You got to bring your receipts, bring your evidence to why you believe what you believe. So that was super important to me personally, and it's something I love to engage in. And I'd love to write another thesis paper, to be honest with you. I wish I could just do it again, have a panel. Wouldn't it be fun though? Whenever you think of a topic, you think it would be like, oh, this would be a cool topic to research. Let me get a panel of people just to drill me with questions to see what I know about it. I mean, in hindsight, it sounds fun, but when you're a senior, like, I don't like a panel. I don't like people.
I would not do that again.
No, you're no like, he's like, nope, one and done for me.
I mean, I definitely appreciate like, because in the beginning of the year, or not even the beginning of the year, the end of my junior year, she was having us pick out our topics, and it's very different realizing like, oh, this is something that sounds cool, and then you actually do all the research on it, and it's like you kind of lose like interest almost, and you realize that like you might have had your opinion about it, but how are you actually going to back that up?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's definitely I was about to say fun. It's not fun.
It felt accomplishing.
Yes,
or like you
it
feel
was
accomplished. Yeah.
But I don't know that I would do it to that extent. I think it's important for me at least to do my thesis, because a lot of times I would always just kind of have my own opinions and not having anything to back it up.
Yeah.
But my thesis paper kind of taught me how to not just like have your opinion, but actually do research on it. I wouldn't go as far to do 29 pages of it,
on every opinion you have.
Yeah,
but that's an important point, Suubi, and it's kind of the heartbeat for me why I love the thesis so much is that everybody has opinions, right? If you have a pulse, you have an opinion, and usually people have very big opinions about these hot topic issues. But opinions, as cool as they are, we all have them, they don't really mean anything unless you're able to back it up with truth. And we believe that the Bible is the ultimate source of truth. I know not everyone would agree with us on that, but we turn to the Bible for these topics. And in addition to the biblical solution that we'll get into and for your topic, we do actual just like research just in the world. We get look at science, history, just all these other factors that we use to back up. So these aren't just, piffy declarations we're making like opinions typically are. No, these are well-researched opinions. And hopefully we're not even researching in such a way to just support our opinion, right? That can be done, bias research, but we're researching both sides of the argument so that we can have a well-informed understanding. So that's super cool, Suubi. So we're going to jump into your thesis. But before that, I love when people come on Thrive and Dive, just for them to share just a little bit about themselves. And I know we're already several minutes into the podcast. But Suubi and Robin, I would love just for you guys to give just a quick, short version of, we've already established where you're graduating from, Suubi, and how long you've been working, Robin. But just any fun facts for the listeners to know, how long you've lived in the area, any information, family related, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Your favorite cereal, I don't know. But Suubi, go ahead and just introduce yourself to us.
Okay. Well, my name is Suubi, and I was born in Texas, and I moved to Florida when I was 9. And the third day that I moved to Florida, I met my best friend, Susanna of Injuries. And fast forward a couple of years, our parents got married. And we became best friends to sisters, which is an incredible blessing. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's part of my testimony, but I feel like it is a big thing in my life that's just so, those moments in your life where it's just kind of like God is, there's no way I can personally deny God knowing that happened. Because how crazy is that?
Yeah.
I work at my church in the coffee shop.
Let's go, Salvies.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been going to Calvary ever since I moved to Vero. And I've been going to Masters for 6 years.
Woo. How many years did I teach you? I can't remember. What year did you come in?
I came in 9th grade. So you taught me for 3 years. 3
years. Okay. Or 2 years. I think 2 years. Yeah.
Well, you did my communications class.
Oh, yeah. Communications. Yeah. Oh,
yeah. I've been on communications since 9th grade. And then I stopped because the teacher left.
Yeah. The class stopped, I think. I guess it was my baby. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Super cool, Subes. And Robin, a little bit about you.
Well, my family moved to Florida in 2004, so we've been here ever since. And that's why I've been teaching here for 21 years because we came here because I got a 5th grade teaching position.
Let's go.
So-
Wait a minute. Really? 5th
Yeah,
grade? And that's
yeah.
what your daughter teaches now?
Yeah.
Wow. Full circle over here.
Full circle.
Yeah.
I taught 5th grade for 3 years, then switched to 2nd because I had Haley.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted a little bit easier time with grading and things like that. So I switched to 2nd, was there for like 8 years or something, 6 or 8 years. Went to 3rd for a year because that's what was needed. And then back to 2nd for another 6 or 8 years. And then, but just got, kind of tired of doing the same thing every day, even though the kids were different. And I love the kids.
Sure.
And that's why I'm still here after 21 years. It's
Yeah.
the kids all the way.
Love it.
But been here for 21 years, lower school academic dean now because of working in so many grade levels
Yeah.
and being here this long. But my family all went to master's. 2 girls graduated from pre-K 3 all the way through 12th grade.
Let's go.
So, and then Hannah went to University of North Florida, then came back and she's teaching 5th grade at master's because she
Full
loved
circle.
it so much. Yeah.
Love it.
And Haley's here at IRSC, trying to figure out what life holds for her.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much my family right now and where we are at Masters and,
Yeah.
and just enjoying the ride.
Let's go. Super cool. Thank you guys for even that small snapshot. I know there's so much more to you guys and your stories, but we'll keep it nice and brief here so we can get into our topic of conversation, which is Suubi's thesis. So Suubs, I'll go ahead and share the title of your thesis. And this is a hot topic issue, just so you're aware for anyone listening with kids in the car or something. I don't know. We're diving straight into it. And that's kind of the point of the thesis presentations is to address controversial issues, right? So your point of controversy was, or your topic was, a Christian perspective of gender affirming care for minors. Ooh, let me get a gender affirming care for minors. Subes, what birthed that desire to explore this topic? There's millions of topics out there. I mean, not millions, that might be an exaggeration, but a lot of different topics you could have picked. Why was this one something that you wanted to address?
Well, when we were picking our topics, Miss Sammons emphasized, that's our thesis teacher, she emphasized that we pick something that we're passionate about, because if we pick something that is just kind of random, we're not going to be motivated to do it, and it's probably not going to come out as good because we don't care about it that much. And for me, something that I really care about, I was thinking about my passions and what I want to do in my life is work with kids, and I specifically am interested in the medical field. I'm very interested in like biology and anatomy, and I eventually want to become a pediatric nurse practitioner.
Oh, wow. Super cool.
So thinking about, okay, I care about kids and I'm interested in science and kind of stuff like that. So I think I came across a TikTok video of this 8-year-old who is biologically a boy, and his mom is sitting there asking him a bunch of questions about why he chose to transition to a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I was just like, how, like, my brain was just like, this is a good topic. Because the way that everyone in the comments and like the followers of that account were just kind of like being like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I saw that video and I expected everyone to be like, how could you do this? This is so, like, he doesn't even know what's going on. And no one was. And I was like, how can that be? So I wanted to research that and kind of prove that it's not a good thing to allow a child that young to decide that. And I wasn't specifically just talking about people who were like 8 years old or younger, but even people who are like my age, like 17 or younger, like around like high school age. They still also don't have the brain capabilities to make decisions like that for a multitude of reasons that I talked about in my thesis. And so specifically because I care about children and their well-being, I found it interesting to do this topic because the main point of my thesis was to talk about how gender-affirming care, which is when you transition basically, is maltreatment, because I care about kids not being maltreated. And I always, when I hear stories about like child abuse, it just really hurts my heart. I mean, it hurts everyone's heart, but I think for me specifically, I've always just liked kids and like taking care of them, and I just think that they're so precious, and they deserve to be protected, and their purity shouldn't be warped into something that's like, I want to be a different gender. Like, so that's, I guess, does that answer your question?
That answers it really well,
okay.
Suubi. That's so cool how much of you have a heart for this topic. And those who might be arguing against our position, a biblical worldview position on this, I hope you even hear Suubi's heart in that, is that she has a care for the kids. She's not here to toot her own position and her own opinion, is that she thinks that the kids are treated best when we follow this biblical worldview pattern and not do gender affirming care. And I don't think I said this from the top, but Robin was your advisor for this thesis process. Robin, tell us a little bit about what an advisor does in the thesis process, and what did you think when Suubi brought this topic to you as an advisee? Is that what the person underneath? Yeah, as a student. Yeah,
Sure. The advisor is basically there to just help guide and direct, not there to give her words or do her research for her, or like work in like an AI capacity or anything like that. It's just more to help guide and like help her think about certain things if she doesn't, or whoever's doing the thesis, just to kind of keep them on the right track and help them if they have any needs. Anything they voice, they send the advisor the specific sections of the thesis to kind of look over and check and just make sure, everything's in line, things look okay. Is there anything they're missing? And then also at the end, kind of the whole entire thing, just to look over one more time. And then their presentations, just kind of making sure they look okay. What kind of questions might the panel ask in the thesis in their defense, so that they're fully prepared for the thesis process, basically. And for Suubi, I'm not sure why she chose me, but I was glad that she did. I enjoy being a thesis advisor, and especially for Suubi, because she was an excellent advisee. And I didn't have to do a whole lot. And then also because I do think her topic is important, and I was excited to be on board for that as well.
That's awesome. So, Suubi, I'm looking over your notes here, and it's quite extensive, and we're obviously not going to get into all the nitty-gritty on this podcast, but let's just pretend someone who's listening is like living in a bubble and I have no idea what gender-affirming care really is. You gave some great terms and some background information. What are some terms people need to know, or just some background on this topic that will help aid our discussion here?
Well, a good term to discuss, because it's basically the foundation and the reason behind why all of this exists, is gender dysphoria. And I didn't fully know what that word meant when I first started, because I thought it meant body dysmorphia. I thought they were equal, but it's actually not. So body dysmorphia is something related to how you see yourself, and is talked about more with patients who are anorexic. And then gender dysphoria is a completely different word, a completely different feeling. It's more so about how I can't really perfectly define it because I've never experienced it. But I don't want to say that it's not real and doesn't exist and is not something that people struggle through. But basically, it's defined as just a feeling of anxiety and unrest because you do not feel like your internal sense of who you are, which is also another vocab word, which is gender identity, your internal sense of being male or female or something like that. So gender dysphoria is an anxiety or unrest because you feel like your gender identity, your internal sense of who you are, is not physically expressed through your body. And that's the reason that people pursue gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care is any type of affirmation to someone's gender identity. So gender dysphoria is when your gender identity doesn't match your body. So gender-affirming care is affirming someone's gender identity.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're saying that some people are claiming that though biologically they're at one gender, their gender identity could be in contradiction to how they're.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yes. So definitely a proclivity that I do not wrestle with as well, but I never want to speak as someone who does not have that proclivity, because everybody here, if you have a sinful nature, which is all of us, we have proclivities and temptations to something. And for some people, and this might be simplifying it too much for some of you guys, but really it's a hard issue. A lot of the things we experience emotionally and physically doesn't mean we now change who we are to match how we're feeling emotionally and physically. Because I feel certain ways that are not godly. And if I were to manifest on every proclivity that's not godly, I could say, well, that's just how I'm created. No, it's just that we have a sinful nature inside of us that we need to starve and resist, like Paul says in Galatians 5. Excellent. Suubi, for giving those information. I want to go through your points of controversy. So your main arguments that you made for the position. And Robin, feel free to jump in with any other thoughts as we go through this, or opinions or insights. But your first point you made, Suubi, was that gender affirming care does not improve mental health. Can you explain why?
So, well, first I'll say that the first time I wrote my thesis before doing any research, it was that gender affirming care, I think you helped me edit it. What was it? It was like lowers or
did it say lowers mental health?
Something like that, or decreases, I think, something like that. So originally it was that it decreases mental health, and that's kind of what I was talking about in the beginning. When you first look at a topic, you might have all these opinions that aren't backed up, and I honestly didn't find any research that said that it. Well, I did find some research, but I didn't find enough research to say that it decreases mental health. So instead, me and Ms. Harwick kind of changed it to be more that it does not improve mental health, which should be just as, what's the word? Important, because any parent who really cares about their child wants their mental health to be thriving and not just at a standstill, or, they want, and and then another reason why it's important that it just does not improve mental health is because the systems that help children transition give this idea that it does improve mental health, and that is not true, because there's research in my thesis that I talked about that shows that it does not improve mental health. So you shouldn't listen to any type of doctor who says that, because there might be some cases of it improving mental health, but the fact that there are cases that there aren't should be enough for a parent to say, I'm not going to risk that, at least in my head.
And that's kind of one of their main selling points, I think. When I say they, I don't want us to be mysterious per figure, but those who are for, what's your topic already? I already forget. Gender affirming care. Those who are for gender affirming care would maybe argue that this increases their mental health. And though it does not decrease, like you said, good job not just throwing your opinions in there, it's not increasing. So it's just, if anything, it's just plateauing. It's just the same. And this is this big promise that, hey, if you follow what the kids feel with their gender identity issues, they're gonna be more confident. They're gonna have better self-esteem. They're gonna be more at peace. They're gonna be more content in life. And in reality, according to what you've researched, that is not the case. That's not backed up. So to go through a huge transition that, man, I'm sure we'll get into it, but like having surgeries that are like irreversible, just for it not to improve your mental health, just stays the same. It's like, man, was it really worth it? Would be my question.
And I mean, there are cases and statistics that show that it does actually decrease, such as Chloe Cole, I know, is a really popular story, I think, because she was kind of just feeling insecure about her body. And when she told that to therapists, they took that as, oh, she just doesn't feel comfortable in her body because she's in the wrong one. More so than just like, it's okay if your body doesn't look the way that the media might portray female bodies to look, and kind of affirming that she, shouldn't be insecure for whatever reason. Personally, me as a Christian, I think you're fearfully and wonderfully made. I don't really know what you say when you don't believe. But they kind of took that and just ran with it. And because of that, she was led to believe she had gender dysphoria. And she went through puberty blockers, which are I think it can either be an injection or a pill that you take that stops your body from producing testosterone and estrogen and basically developing into an adult, which is one of my points that we'll get into later. And then she also underwent cross-sex hormones. So because she was a girl, she started taking testosterone to produce more male characteristics. And she also underwent breast removal surgery, which is irreversible. So she's now detransitioned because after she had essentially become a boy, she realized that's not what she wanted.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's so sad that the doctors didn't take that into account, that she's 15 years old. Your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25.
Yeah.
The decision-making parts of your brain, the prefrontal lobe, cortex doesn't fully develop until you're 25, and she's 15. And so giving her the authority to make that kind of decision was that was the first wrong thing, I think, in my mind, that went down. Yeah,
but could you imagine if we took everything a adolescent says seriously with the way they feel and just jumped on it like, oh, they must be right. They're obviously the most in touch with their feelings, their body, and their rational prefrontal cortex. And, I don't know I work with middle schoolers and high schoolers. That's my job in youth ministry. And I think, I don't want to make an absolute here, but I think most people struggle with their bodies at some point during those years in some way. Like, oh, I'm just not how I need to be. And obviously social media and all the comparisons makes it so much worse. But then to jump onto something and be like, they're insecure, so therefore they must be they're in the wrong body is quite a jump. It's kind of jumping off the ledge a little bit there. Yeah. Any thoughts on that first point, Robin?
Just that I felt that Suubi was right on track, that just because you have those thoughts doesn't mean that's something you jump on. And especially with a child with the frontal cortex not developing and them just saying, oh, I think I want to be a girl. If they're a boy, okay, I like chocolate.
Yeah, I want to be a superhero.
Give me a chocolate, So I just admired her and her thought process. Felt like it was on board with what the Bible says about that. It says to teach your children, at all times of the day. And I feel like when parents allow their children to make those decisions, that's not what they're doing. They're not considering other possible mental strains or issues. They're not looking to God's word. There's just all kinds of things that they're not taking into consideration. Like you said, they're just taking the child's feelings, and that's it. Yeah, taking it for face value.
No, that's good, Robin. And I don't want to minimize the feelings of those who struggle with maybe body confidence more than the average person. Like, I don't want to generalize it. Yes, most people struggle with their bodies, but I don't know if there's we can't quantify it. That's the hard part. We're going off of people's feelings and words. So, in my experience, I never want to jump on something when I was an adolescent. I'm thankful for great parents that said no. They said the word no a lot because no, you can't do that. I don't care if you feel that way or want to do that or you think that's the Lord's will for your life. You're not doing that, So that's super important. Which leads us to your second point you made in the evidence of controversy section of your thesis, Suubi. And you said that gender affirming care disrupts natural child development. Talk about that for us.
Yeah, so I kind of touched on that when I talked about puberty blockers, but I think that at first that point might not seem maybe as crazy, but I guess to me it is, just because I think in every other aspect, people will see that as harmful. Like in my thesis presentation, I gave the example of so first off, in my presentation, I talked about a college level textbook about child maltreatment that talked about the factors of spotting child maltreatment. And one of those is that if a parent's actions are insensitive or harmful to a child's developmental needs. And so when I first heard that, I thought about a child who might be like malnourished and not being given the amount of nutrients that they need to grow and develop and become an adult, and not just kind of stay where they are, because everyone would see that as harmful. If you see a kid who's like emaciated, you're going to be like, what kind of parent would do that? You need to help your kid grow and give them food and not just starve them, because that's harmful. Everyone thinks that generally, I think. And I think that it's odd that that's not applied to gender affirming care, because as I did my research about how that all works and I heard about puberty blockers, I was just like, how is that normal to just stop your kid from developing into the adult that God intended them to be? Like, God made puberty a thing for a reason. He intends for us to go through the processes of it so we can be healthy, functioning adults. And I think it's unfair to children, especially considering that they're so young, to just jump on that and be like, okay, I'm going to stop all types of development. And I haven't done a lot of research on puberty blockers alone, and I know that sometimes they're used for other reasons not relating to transitioning. So I guess I'm not fully talking about that, but just like taking your child's feelings and saying that it's valid enough to essentially harm them. That's what the textbook kind of says. It's that it's harmful to be insensitive to your child's developmental needs, and your child needs to produce certain hormones through puberty. And it's to me, it's synonymous to any other type of abuse or maltreatment that you'd hear about. So, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance where you got that textbook definition of what malpractice and child abuse is, and how the puberty blockers, hormone blockers doesn't fall into that category in terms of their development. Like, when you starve a kid, like you said, that's a problem. We as teachers, or when I was a teacher, I guess even as a youth pastor, if I notice, a kid who looks malnourished and or is just not, looking good, I got to report that, right? Yeah. So it's like, what's the difference, I guess? Yeah, that's interesting. And the irreversible surgery, that still kind of can't get over that. Like, man, something that can't be reversed. They're making a huge decision at a young age where their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. I feel like that's all the science I need to know this isn't right. And you add the biblical truth to it, it's like, okay, even more so. But
there's also like statistics about how gender dysphoria actually goes away for a lot of kids. In Jordan B. Peterson's podcast, which I listened to and because it helped me kind of know more about the topic. I used it as one of my sources for my research. He talked about two statistics. One of them was like 80% of children's gender dysphoria goes away as they grow into their biological sex by adulthood, and that the majority of kids whose gender dysphoria is not magnified, so like they're not being like, oh, okay, like let's get you on hormone treatment. Like the majority of kids who just, maybe they feel gender dysphoric and they just kind of go along with life, it will go away. So it is even more kind of just like, you cannot just blow this out of proportion because it will likely go away.
Yeah, you saying that kind of reminds me of a childhood memory of mine where for me, I'm very like sensitive to pain in my body. Like I feel like at a level that's, my pain tolerance is very low. And I always would ask my mom, like, Mom, I gotta go to the doctor. Like, my back's hurting, my arm's hurting. And my mom was like, can we just wait a little bit? Let's just wait and see if this is gonna, go away on its own before we go get treatment, right? So it's kind of like that. It's like this gender dysphoria. And while it could be real and present in the life of a child, according to Dr. Peterson, you're saying it seems to go away.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's not make a big decision in that small segment of those feelings. Yeah. Any thought from you, Robin, before I move on to the third point?
No, just that you referred to Chloe Cole earlier, and
you introduced me to her, so thank you.
You're welcome. Just even with her and that later feeling of this was a mistake, you had mentioned in your thesis, I think also that with that gender dysphoria, she even mentioned that it was afterwards she realized she just wasn't comfortable in her own body. Like, can you share with him just a little bit about that? Maybe you were going to later about what she felt her issue actually was in her own body, like with the media and stuff, and that how it wasn't like gender dysphoria. Like it could have been determined as other issues.
Yeah. So she kind of had, like I said, she had insecurities about her body and just how it didn't. She was disappointed, I guess, in how her body wasn't developing the way she wanted it to through puberty. But she also, I don't quote me on this, but I am pretty sure in an news article, they talked about how Chloe also had ADHD and could have been on the spectrum. And I think I read a statistic about how that's actually pretty common. And I read a couple medical journal articles about how people's psychiatric conditions, specifically teenagers, adolescents, their psychiatric conditions can be dismissed as gender dysphoria. Like a lot of young autistic girls do not relate to their peers, they're like girls, because I think autism spectrum disorder makes you a little more, maybe I guess relate to guys more for some reason. And I don't want to say that and be like, this is totally right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just kind of read through a couple of articles that talked about the reasons why a lot of young autistic girls are confused as having gender dysphoria just because they don't specifically relate to people who are not, girls who are not on the spectrum.
Yeah. So the main point is that in Chloe's case and maybe a lot of people's case, there's could be some other underlying issues that are in play in terms of the psyche instead of just slapping gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when it gets ignored like that, it causes a lot of regret because I think kind of like in Chloe's case, she had insecurity, she had maybe autism spectrum disorder. And so when they were like, oh, this is going to fix all your problems, and it didn't, it created this regret, which is a big problem through this whole topic, is just regret. Because this, I don't know, this is kind of a sensitive thing to say, but I read a medical journal article about this that said the regret has pushed people to take their own lives because they regret what they did so much, and they wish that their doctors analyze and assess the situation more through thorough psychotherapy. Like there is a quote that literally said that adolescents who've transitioned themselves have expressed regret over not having had a chance to express their concerns through psychotherapy. I think that's what it said. And how they found it weird how their doctors were just kind of going along with it because they were so young. And the statistics on this, one of the statistics on this article said that there are twice as many serious attempts for those who've undergone gender affirming care than those who haven't. Both who have gender dysphoria, those who've undergone surgery for it. Apparently, there's more probability of them being suicidal, and I think that's very telling about how they portray it to be like a fix-all, and how they just kind of say, oh, I think you have gender dysphoria, even though it could be depression, anxiety, it could be anything else that they can find, but they decide not to explore that and just say gender dysphoria, and that leads them to regret it a lot. Not in all cases, but I think a significant amount.
Yeah, and it goes back to your first point, how you made the point that, you know, doing these transitionings does not increase mental health. And you have the data to show that, you know, unfortunately, those who go through the treatment are more prone to suicide than those who did not, according to what you're saying, according to your research. So that should be ringing alarm bells in our ear. Like, I mean, if it was even a little bit helping our mental well-being, doing those things to those kids, should we at least see less tendency for suicide in that demographic than those who did not transition?
Right.
That becomes real. I mean, this is heartbreaking. Like, man, this for someone to want to take their life because of not getting the what they thought they were promised, you know, a satisfaction, a confidence in this new form is should be make people aware of the evidence. So this leads us to the third point, which is gender affirming care leads children to embrace a false sense of identity. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but unpack that a little bit more for us, Suubs.
So for me, the research that I did that specifically made me want to choose that as one of my, points of controversy was this article that was actually, because I was trying to find more articles that were for gender affirming care. And I found this survey study done by a group of medical professionals about why the government should not take away gender affirming hormones for teens. And it's a survey, so it was like actual verbal answers, I think, were included in that. And so some of the teenagers were expressing that if they had their hormones taken away from them, they would take their own lives. And that those who actually have had it taken away from them, because I think it was like different between states at the time that was written, when it was taken away from them, they felt like they had no purpose and no identity and no reason to live. And that article was written to get people to have compassion. And it did kind of create a sense of compassion in me. But it also made me really concerned that, like, without this thing, they feel like their life is just worthless. And I get kind of what the writers of that article are trying to say. Like, this is their identity. This is something that they need. But it's like, I feel like it's important as a parent to make sure your child has an understanding of who they are based on their intrinsic value and not because of something that they need to take every day. That just seems like a really unhealthy attachment to something. And when I read it, I was just like, that is just insanely sad, but not for the reason that I would be like, okay, so I need to make sure that these kids get their hormones, more so that we need to make sure that these kids understand what value they have, even without some hormone pills. And yeah, so.
That's good. And that's the main selling point, that intrinsic value. And you already alluded to this earlier in this podcast when we talked about, as us with the Christian worldview, we know that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We know that we are God's handiwork, his workmanship. But for those who don't have that Christian paradigm, what do they say to themselves to give them that intrinsic value, right? If anything, if we're taking a hardcore secular view, an atheistic approach, we are the product of chance and randomness, natural selection, survival of the fittest, and really there isn't a whole lot of intrinsic value apart from you're just stronger or more smarter than the next guy type of thing. Yeah. So let's talk about why this intrinsic value is so important, which leads to your biblical solution on this whole topic. Why do we have intrinsic value according to a Christian worldview? And just address any other biblical perspective that you added to this conversation.
Okay, so there were 2 points in my biblical solution because gender affirming care for minors is kind of like a dual topic because it talks about, firstly, trans, and then secondly, parenting. So I'll focus more so on transgenderism, I guess. And the reason why we have intrinsic value, I think the most important point that stood out to me in one of the books that I was reading to help me research was called God in the Transgender Debate by Andrew T. Walker. And then another book that Mr. Angel gave me that I don't remember the title of, but it talked about how being made in God's image is one of the most important parts of every single human being. And even if you do not have the same faith as anyone else, even if you don't have the same faith as a Christian, for us, it's true that every single person has value. And if you don't believe the same way, then I guess there's really no way to tell you, like, you have so much value because you're made in God's image. If you don't believe in the Bible, there's no way to convince you of that. But, being made in God's image kind of just shows how no matter what we might feel, the basis of our creation is God. like when we go back to it, no matter what we feel or what we might have been through that we might want to let it define us, none of that really defines us, because the main defining characteristic or trait about every single human being is that we're all created in God's image. And a big part about intrinsic value is just how Jesus died on the cross for us. That was like a big thing. That is a big thing that still applies to everyone today. And that just shows, at least for me, it really shows how valuable we are, because he died for us, and that shows how important we are to God. And I don't know. Yeah.
No, that's spot on. Yeah, Robin, any thoughts from a biblical standpoint on this?
I agree with Suubi completely. And also for those that don't know the Lord, that, maybe look to science or other areas for truth, all that floating out there, the relativism of it, what is your truth, that kind of thing. I don't believe that we each have a truth. I believe there is one truth, the Bible, God's word. God is truth. He created us. He sustains us. We are his by right of creation, but not to negate these feelings, because I think they do truly exist, like Suubi said. And in my opinion, it's love. The Bible says, it's not, this is truth. We are called to be truth and light. And so it's not that we negate these feelings. We, admit that they exist, but we also love these people and show love, and through God's love. And hopefully they'll see in us a light that makes them want to learn about God's love. So that intrinsic value, hopefully can be seen through others. And then in turn, when they can see, and Suubi talked about this in her thesis as well, hopefully they can see through us his love and want that, that love as well. And then through that, they can see that change that takes place when they gain their salvation. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, that was well said. And it's a perspective we should all have. If you're listening, you are a Christian. We do want to address these issues like gender affirming care, but we do so with a heart of love and a desire for them to see the light and to experience the light and truth that Robin just talked about. And if you are listening and you do struggle with this, or you have a anti-position to what we have shared with you, I would love to hear why you believe what you believe, and I want to listen, I want to hear. And ultimately, our hope is that you see that we love you, and we love you as a person. We don't affirm the actions you're taking, but we love you and want to help you find truth. Because like Robin says, and I want to double down on that, we do believe that there is one source of truth, and that is ultimately found in God. And he has expressed that truth through creation, how we were made, and through his written word, and Jesus Christ, who was the word. So we want to just direct you to that. We're just beggars helping another beggar find some bread. And we have the bread, according to our point of view. And we just want you to have the bread too. So get the bread. Yeah. Well, and any closing thoughts, Suubi and Robin? Maybe you have a whole section called Call to Action. I'm not saying you got to go through all that, but any final thoughts as we close this episode of Thrive and Dive? Yeah. Well, what was your call to action? I read through it.
Say go through your.
Okay.
Yeah. What? Give us a final hoorah.
Yeah. Okay. So my call to action for parents concerning this topic is 3 main things. So, firstly, following political movements and campaigns and leaders who are against gender affirming care for minors and want to stop it. Specifically, it was pretty cool. As I was writing my thesis, President Donald Trump signed an executive order that actually banned gender affirming care for kids, which is pretty awesome.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
And he signed an executive order that only recognized 2 genders, which is a whole nother side of the LGBTQIAPK plus community. But
don't have time to get all that. Yeah.
And then the second call to action is that parents should talk about these kind of things with their kids, even though I think maybe it's not something that everyone really wants to talk about with their child, transgenderism. I know for me, at least when I was younger, I don't think it was as big as this, but I remember like in my preschool, I had a girl who had 2 mothers because, yeah. And I remember being like super confused about that. And I talked to my mom a little bit about that because it kind of gave me a perspective from a parent about like, how do you talk to your kids about sexuality and whatever, even like at such a young age? Because at this point in our society, it's going to be presented to them one way or another. Like I was like 4 years old and I was asking questions about this because that's just the way that society is going. And so I think that parents just, although it might be a little uncomfortable, especially because sometimes the children can be so young when they have questions about this and you just kind of don't want to talk about that until they're older. But I think it's important to give at least a basis of understanding for your kids about kind of what this all means. Like there are some people who are, I don't want to say confused. I feel like that's a trigger word for a lot of people, but there are some people who feel like they're not this gender and that they are actually a different gender than the one they were born in. And I think it's important to talk about that because when you don't talk about it, children will find the answers on their own through social media, and social media can warp anything to look a certain way. So I think it's better for kids to learn about it in the home, even if it means teaching them about it at a young age, because then they won't go to media to look for answers, and instead they'll get it from the home where hopefully there's a biblical foundation. So yeah, and then the second point in my call to action was that, can I see the slides?
Oh yeah, I have the slides here.
I don't know, I can't remember the last one. Yeah, okay, the third one, which seems kind of basic, but I think it is kind of the foundation, and it's very necessary. The foundation for Christian parenting is just to make sure that your kids have an understanding of Jesus. And I think at a young age, kids don't fully understand how crazy Jesus' love for us is, but I think it's important to at least instill in them, like, and show them how important it is to you of what Jesus did, so that when they get older and they do begin to understand it, they will kind of have a reverence and a respect for God because of what he did to save us, and out of respect kind of follow his laws about, this topic, and just how, identity is found in Jesus. When you teach your kids about God and lead them to, you can't force your kid to get saved, but when you lead them to make those decisions, it's important because then it teaches them that their identity is now found in Jesus and not about how they feel. Galatians 2 verse 2 says, "It's no longer I who live, but Christ in me." And I think that really applies to this topic because it's not about me and how I feel. It's about Jesus, and that is what defines me, along with just being created in God's image. If children are taught about that and about how identity is found in Jesus, and also that you shouldn't trust your own heart and feelings, I think that's a big one. Proverbs 28 verse 26, I think, says, "Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered." And I think that is also an important thing that parents should be teaching to their children about. So yeah, just like teaching their children about the Bible and what it says about everything, including transgenderism, and just making sure that you find your identity in Christ and that you don't find your identity based on how you feel and like in your own mind. Because at the end of the day, I think that they're trying to get this to change, but gender dysphoria is a psychological disorder or condition. And psychology is about the science of the mind. And this verse says, "Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool." So kind of teaching that principle of just like, you are who God says you are, and that's not something like scary, like, oh, I'm just like a puppet. But no, it's not like that, because God, I talked about this in my discussion, but God cares about us more than we even care about ourselves. And he sees a purpose for us, and he has planned out a purpose for us that we don't even know yet. So even if we might feel like, I don't really believe that God was right when he made me a girl, or I think I'd be better off as a guy or whatever, you can trust in the fact that God has a plan for you and that he cares about you and loves you and he only wants the best for you. And so you can actually find comfort in that rather than being like, I'm just being controlled. No, it's just more so that you have someone who's looking out for you and he's going to make the best decisions for you even before you're born by making you the gender you are and making you born into the family you are, and just every single aspect about your life God has planned out, and we can actually trust in that and find comfort in that. So,
wow, man, air horn. Man, you were straight up preaching over here. My goodness, I have nothing else to say. You have anything else to say, Robin?
Not really. Just that she's right on with God giving us the gifts and abilities and talents that he's given each of us, and he's made us male and female, and he's given us those different gifts and abilities with our best interest at heart. And like she said, he loves us more than we love ourselves, more than we love others. And we just want to share that with others, but at the same time, let them know of his truth and love. And so she's right on.
Amen. Well, you guys, if you've never heard it, you just heard the gospel, which is that Jesus loves you. And John 3:16 says that he died for you and he wants to be in a relationship with you and spend eternity with you. And he has your best interest in mind. So instead of me resisting that, maybe start to embrace it and see what happens. Challenge you with that. Yeah. Well, Suubi, Robin, wrong one. Thank you for your time this afternoon. We're filming here in March, but by the time this releases, it might be way past March at this point. But thank you. Suubi, you did it. Good job.
Thank you.
Let's go. Thanks for being on Thrive and Dive. I appreciate you guys' time. This is so cool. Well, folks, this is Thrive and Dive, thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. Have a great rest of your day.